Elizabeth, it's all you.
Okay, well, thanks for to all of you for joining us this evening so that we can give you as much information as we can about our proposed dues adjustment that will be coming up at our district convention. Joe, if you'll go ahead and share the PowerPoint.
I will do that.
As you know, or you may not know, I'm the district treasurer and also past governor, and Joe is the immediate past governor of the Carolinas district. And we have been working together along with the board on this proposed district dues adjustment. Next slide, please. So what we're going to do tonight is give you background why we came to this proposal. We're going to also look ahead, and Joe will be able to do show you some projections. And we're also going to give you some information about how clubs might mitigate this proposed dues increase. So just for some historical information, our last dues adjustment was October 1st, 2011, and that is 12 years ago. As you know, we've had many, many changes since then. The cost of living has increased. Our district membership has drastically decreased. And right now, because of the pandemic, inflation's unusually high, though that is starting to come down in some areas. But it's very interesting that the areas where inflation has hit the most are items that are in our budget, such as travel. Our event costs have gone up. So, you know, travel, food, lodging, but even paper, let me tell you, has gone up. We've also seen a decline in the stock market. That hasn't affected us greatly. We do have a very healthy reserve, but our bylaws only allow us to take 6% of that reserve each year to help us balance our budget. And there's a slide up ahead that will help you better understand that. But basically what we're saying is, and here's the consumer price index. So it has gone up. The increase is now 35% from 2011. What I will say is that our district secretary, Leah, is very excellent at cost efficiencies, and we have cut our budget in every single way possible. We've tried to reduce our expenses, but as many of you know who are in business, sometimes you cannot cut your way to prosperity. And we are a dues-based organization, and it is this. All of these situations have caused the board to have to look at requesting the House of Delegates consider a dues adjustment. Next slide. Unfortunately, our membership has also been in decline. We've seen it possibly that decline starts slowing a little bit, but basically we had 11 years ago, or in 2011, we had 7,000 members. And now we only have 4,200. So we have basically our dues revenue has decreased quite a bit, you know, almost 40%. So again, with the ability to use our reserves, which we have had to do in the past few years, we hadn't had to do that until quite recently. We have been able to balance our budgets, but we can't continue to do that. So this is a bar chart which will show you our revenue and expenses. Now, this does not include our event revenue and expenses or our investment income and losses. Just so you'll know, our event revenue and expense, you know, we try not to, quote, lose money on our conferences. But the fact of the matter is, usually we try and keep our registrations reasonable, and we could come in anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 short in our budgets for mid-year and convention. For our mid-year, we now have a one-day event, and we do try and keep our costs as low as possible for those events. But that's also, you know, providing member benefits too for those events for people to come and have fellowship and education and with, you know, Kiwanians from around the district. So as you can see, basically our dues revenue only covered our expenses 4 out of these years, 2012, I still can't say that right, 2013, 2020, and 2021. So that's very interesting because those were pandemic years. But what happened was when the pandemic hit, we had gotten all of our dues revenue and then we didn't have our events. And so our governor-elect reduced their stipends for travel, and we were able to actually have a little bit of a gain for those years. But we are post-pandemic, we are back to having our expenses, our income not cover our expenses. Joe, can you go to the next slide? So now this shows you the way we've been able to balance our budget is with our investment income, because we've had some very good years. Our pandemic years were especially good. But then in 2022, what happened to the stock market? Our investment portfolio went down. We, in 2020 and 2021, those gains that you see, we actually, instead of just rolling those over to the balance sheet we actually put those gains in a reserve, a board designated reserve that we were able to use in 2022 and we are going to use in 2023. So we reserved our gain in 20 and 21 for 22 and 23. But after 23, that reserve will be gone. Any questions about that? Okay, let's move to the next slide. All right, so this I mentioned it a bit earlier. We have done a very good job of containing our spending and only spending what we absolutely have to have. You know, if going to digital and virtual communication saves us money, because one of the things that's gone up, in case you don't know, is paper products have vastly increased. We reduced, as I said earlier, we reduced our officer stipends during the pandemic because they weren't traveling as much. We haven't increased any line items or mileage reimbursements for any of our board or our volunteers. We're at we only reimburse at 35 cents a mile, which is obviously about 30 cents under the federal mileage reimbursement. The other great thing that happened that allowed us to keep operating normally was the District Foundation, whose mission it is to support service leadership programs in the district, did fund our Key Club and Circle K costs for the past 3 years and is also budgeted to cover those costs in 2023 budget. Those costs are not for the kids. Those are for the adult administrators and chaperones, especially for Key Club. Circle K doesn't require chaperones. Those are the adult volunteer costs that we help pay for, and the foundation has graciously allowed to grant us those monies. As I said earlier, our surpluses in 20 and 21, we designated those so that we could. We've known for a couple of years that we needed a dues adjustment. And let's just say it, a dues increase. But we knew that during a pandemic, we could not do that. So those surpluses allowed us some time to be able to make sure we had done our due diligence and all of our research to propose what we consider to be a very reasonable dues adjustment. And again, we are a very blessed district because we do have a reserve, and it is for emergencies. It is to cover emergencies, major emergencies, but we are allowed a 6% draw every year, and we've been using that. And we usually put it in our budget, but until a few years ago, we never actually drew it. We very rarely drew it, and we started drawing it about 4 years ago. Any questions about our finances and how we manage it?
Suggestion?
Yes.
Hi, Art Keeneth from Lee County. I just moved here from Spokane, Washington, to take care of my 95-year-old mother-in-law and got involved with the club here in Lee County. And I was a member of Spokane for 6 years. And one thing I see on here, I was the treasurer for our club back there, and president, all the other good stuff. But we had a division council, and our club paid $5 per member per year to help offset the lieutenant governor's expenses. Has that been something that's been talked about?
No. In the past, I know that some divisions have done that. Divisions are not, let me see, I'm not going to be diplomatic about this. According to the bylaws, divisions are not, should not be considered administrative arms of Kiwanis International. The district is an administrative arm of Kiwanis International, and you shouldn't have a bank account or a tax ID number or anything like that. We have had in the past divisions that had dues, and I said, please call that a donation. And they were managed by one of the clubs, but
Right, that's what we did.
But we have, if we are going to ask, in my opinion, this is just my personal opinion, if we're going to ask lieutenant governors to travel to their clubs, we need to make sure everybody is on the same playing field and everybody is able to, in other words, you don't know the economic disparity of your board or your lieutenant governors, and you need to make sure that that you just compensate everybody fairly. If one division did it, we can't ask every division to do that. And again,
What if we did that and rolled it into the
that would effectively be a dues increase if you did that. First of all, you'd have to, I don't know that we're going to take that under advisement, because I'm not sure that would be appropriate under our current bylaws to actually ask that be done.
again, I'm new, so
that is a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea, but let's take that under advisement and we will look at that.
Again, I'm new, so I'm probably fishing out of water.
No, that's okay. And again, people have, divisions have done this before, but I think we want everybody, if it was elective, that would be one thing. But if it's a really great idea. But we would want everybody to be able to, benefit from something like that. I'm not quite sure. Our bylaws wouldn't allow for it right now. So
yeah, Elizabeth, I believe the reason is that the division doesn't have a set of bylaws that governs it, and it's not considered an the lieutenant governor is making, well, even in our district, the lieutenant governor is not making decisions. We have trustees, and so therefore, because there's no control over that, Kiwanis International does not approve of us promoting that.
Yeah.
Great idea, but since there's no way to control those, the decisions made with that money, and since the IRS says we're not supposed to do it, we better not do.
Question.
Yes.
What is it that you could do? I mean, couldn't understand because both of you talking at the same time. I didn't understand. What was he wanting to do? Or did
have clubs within a division support, give money to support that lieutenant governor.
Doesn't that come out of the money that comes to you?
Well, yeah, he was suggesting that as a way to offset the budget expense for lieutenant governors. But we're not able to do that in our district.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Joe,
All
I
right.
think I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, what I want to focus on now is kind of like specifically where we are and when we get to the dollars and cents and then think about how that moves forward. And I want to share with you all the discussions that the board had and the facts that they were looking at and assumptions that they made as they were going through the process to determine what the recommended adjustment to the dues would be. So the first slide here was something that I did at our board retreat back in October, where I just said, let's look at this very simply. We have a projected budget deficit for this year of almost $49,000. And that did not include the cost that the foundation was going to fund relative to Key Club and CKI for our administrators. So that was another $22,000. So effectively the cost to run the district over and above what our budgeted revenue was almost $71,000 this year. Now, as Elizabeth said, we had reserves that we could carry forward to cover our piece of that. And of course, the foundation was funding their piece. But just very simply, if you just accept that $71,000 was the deficit that we would have had we not had those two sources of income that were available to us for this year. When you break that down by number of members for the current year, you know, at 4,000 members, that's about $18 per person that we were shy. And if we have membership losses, you know, it could get down lower than that. Now, obviously, we started the year about 4,200. So we're more in that $18 range for the current year as to where we are. And that's recognizing that we were going to have a 6% draw on the investment account. You can see on that right column, if we didn't have that 6% draw, if we didn't have that reserve, we'd have been looking at about a $23 deficit for the current year, round numbers, give or take. But what we have to think about then is going forward, you know, there's going to be changes in operating costs and other changes in what our membership numbers would be. And, you know, when we put this together kind of quickly at the retreat, you know, we were just cautionary that we hadn't done all the homework on that yet back last October. But now we've done some homework. So some things that we looked at as a board in this process is, well, what are the projections for increased costs? And what I was able to find is several different sources, but all of them seemed to think that we were going to continue for the next several years in a 2.5% to 5% inflationary environment. Now, that's less than we've had the last couple of years. As you all know, when you go to the grocery store or you shop at your to buy some gas for your car, you can see much more significant increases than that. The biggest number for us when we talk about a per member cost that we need to cover, the one that changes and hurts us the most is when our membership numbers go down. Because while CPI may be creeping up at 2.5 to 3, and in prior years, that was probably still where we were before we got the real spike a couple of years ago. For the last several years, we've been experiencing about a 5% membership loss in the district. So for the last 11 years, we've seen about every year approximately 5%. Now, those numbers were a little bit higher during the pandemic. We had some very significant losses those first 2 years. And we're hoping that that trend will slow and reverse. And our clubs are certainly working hard for that. Folks at the district level are working hard for that. But we also recognize that the mere having of a dues increase may cause some clubs to say, you know, it's not worth it to us anymore. Some members to say, I'm not going to pay more to be a member. We don't want that to happen. But we have to realistically imagine that that could happen, because it did happen 12 years ago when we raised dues. So that's another factor that the board had to consider was, what are our membership numbers going to be in the years going forward? And I think we have to recognize that until we do turn that around, that we're going to see continuing increases in cost per member for running the district. The board also thought about, well, what period of time should a dues adjustment cover? Now, as we've said, it's been 12 years. That's too long. Quite frankly, it would have been much easier on everybody if we made a move, 5, 6, 7 years ago. We didn't, because we were in the throes of the formula campaign, an effort to increase our membership. And it was not thought at the time that we needed to make the adjustment, or that we should make the adjustment in that time period. But we also didn't know a pandemic was coming. And quite frankly, had we known that, other adjustments and decisions might have been made, but nobody knew. But the board thinks that, we should, if we're going to have a dues increase, that we should hope that we would get to 4 or 5 years at least before we have to deal with this again. Some folks have said, well, can we phase in a dues increase? And I'm going to give you some numbers soon that'll kind of tell you why we really can't phase it in any significant way. And really the whole process that we're going through is a lot of work, and I don't think anybody really wants to do it more than every 4 or 5 or even more years. So let's talk specifically about the assumptions that were in the 5-year projections that we now have done at the district level. Key assumptions are that we would probably drop about 10% of our membership. Again, we hope that doesn't happen, but we have to be prepared that it could. And we considered a 5% decrease in subsequent years, consistent with the trend we've seen over the last 11 years. The other thing that we know is likely to happen, and let's talk for a minute about Kiwanis International, who is also proposing a dues increase of the same amount of $30 a year per member. We don't know what's going to pass for Kiwanis International. Their convention is later this month. It will be a hotly debated item, I'm sure, during our House of Delegates at the International Convention in Minneapolis. And at the end of the day, they may or they may not be successful at getting the full $30 approved by the delegates who are there. If they do not, a likely result of that is that they'll push costs down to the districts that they would have otherwise covered. Things like governor training, costs for our district administrators and CKI and key club governors, that sort of thing. Costs that they currently would cover are those that are likely that would be pushed down to our district. So that's additional cost that we really don't have in the budget, but is a possibility. We also made the assumption of continued inflation of about 3% for the next 5 years. Now, not every line item is going to change, because we do have control over some of those where we can cap the expenses, but some things we can't control. And then the other thing is that our service leadership program costs that previously were being covered by the district foundation as I showed you before, $22,000 was the amount we had in the budget. What we're finding is, with the significant increases in travel costs and hotels and meals, that in fact, it really should be higher than 22,000. So we needed to bump that number up just to reflect current year experience. So all of that put into the nice Excel spreadsheets and worked our way through it. And the minimum dues increase that we would need for next year, just to break even for 1 year, is about $22. Because of continued decrease in membership, of some increases in cost, it goes up about $4 a year. per member. So as you can see, the idea of phasing it in would be, well, I'd be raising it $22 now, and then I have to raise it again. But it's even more complicated than that, because with the $30 increase, that would give us a positive cash flow for the next 3 years. And it would give us about $50,000 of excess revenue that we could use in the following 2 years before we would have to think about changing our dues again. Now, who knows what we ultimately spend? As we've said, you know, Leah works hard to minimize our costs, and she will continue to do that. Our lieutenant governors, if they're out there traveling and submitting their requests for reimbursements, they will fully utilize their budgets. If they do not, then we may have some other funds that are not spent during a particular year. But we think responsibly, as a board, you know, we have to assume that we're going to spend the money that people are entitled to receive. And what we're really focused on is not trying to run the district out of the pockets of the people that are volunteering in these leadership roles. We want them to ask for their mileage reimbursements. We want them to be attending the conventions as they should, and be able to get reimbursed for part of their costs. And again, I stress it's part of their costs. They still are incurring certain costs to go to conventions, etc. So all that put together, where the board wound up was to say that let's go for the $30. You know, it works out to about $2.50 a month for our district dues increase. Now, I know there's another $2.50 that Kiwanis International is looking for a month. But at the end of the day, you know, we have to look out for the district. That is the responsibility of the board. And that's what we've been trying to do. So any questions before I go down on some other ideas about this?
I could just say it was well presented.
Thanks, Art.
Joe,
Yes.
this is Gary Hooser from Twin City Club.
Hey, Gary.
Sorry for my voice, but things would be, this has been a great presentation. I agree with the gentleman who made the previous comment. How much of this is available to us as presidents and treasurers and membership chairs?
Well, this presentation, first of all, we're recording tonight's webinar.
Okay,
So the webinar itself will be available on the district website, I'd say by the end of the week or beginning of next week. And the presentation itself, which is a PowerPoint presentation, we can also make that available through the website.
okay. I think having our at least some members of the board review the webinar would be very helpful.
Okay. Good.
Joe, it's Nancy, president of the Mecklenburg Club.
Hi,
Thank
Nancy.
you. Hey, how are you?
Good.
Great presentation. Really appreciate all the detail. You guys did a great job.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much.
And not a topic that's a lot of fun. We know that, but I think we're all, you know, we're realists. We understand. We all have personal budgets. We've seen what's been happening to those, but it's not what I wanted to do as my year after being governor, but it's what I had to do. So I'm happy to help the board and try to get through this. Okay. All right, now my screen decided to freeze. There we go. So what we talked about at mid-year with regard to this is, you know, how do we go about talking to our clubs, first of all, and how do you all then talk to your members? And I think we've been focused on trying to have as open and honest discussion about these items as we possibly can, sharing information as it's been debated at the board level. And we think the same is true with your clubs. And Gary, your thought of having some board members watch the webinar, I think probably makes a lot of sense. I think in working with our clubs and working with the members, if we really focus on what's changed, it's been a lot, as Elizabeth said early in the presentation. And, you know, every member that we have is experiencing the same sorts of changes in their costs. So I think if we put it on a personal level, you know, I mean, the price of eggs has come back down, but you look where they were, you know, just a couple of months ago, and it was just, you just couldn't believe it, you know. I mean, we still see it with our gasoline prices. But, you know, when you go visit a hotel, I was at a hotel myself this recently up in Delaware, and it was like $300 and something a night. And that same hotel used to cost me, you know, less than 200. So those are the kind of costs that we're still dealing with, because as Elizabeth also mentioned earlier, that's exactly where our budget is being spent, is on reimbursing these kinds of costs for our volunteers. I also think it's important to focus on the fact that it's a $2.50 a month increase. Let's not talk about this as 100% change in the district dues, and I recognize that it is, but it's $30. It's $2.50 a month, and I think if we put that in perspective to what has not changed, I think you say, well, I think I can probably figure out how to fund that. Kids still need us. And as I said, more than ever in a lot of communities coming out of the pandemic. And I think our members all still enjoy doing service for their communities. And as we serve together, we're certainly way more effective than as individual volunteers would be. So the purpose of having a club is still there. And, you know, for clubs to function in their communities, being a Kiwanis club, we believe gives them a very recognizable and reputable forum on which that they can raise money and serve the communities. So people recognize the name Kiwanis. In certain communities, they obviously recognize it maybe more than in others, but in all of them, when you're dealing with trying to do fundraising, et cetera, it gives you credibility when you walk in the door. So being part of the organization, there is value, I think, that comes from paying dues into Kiwanis, and that hasn't really changed. Just the cost to do it has changed. So what we also have tried to think about are how can our clubs mitigate the impact of a dues increase of $2.50 a month? How can that be mitigated? How can we find other ways to raise money that can be used in our administrative funds? So we thought about a few. The first two that are listed there, Raise Right and Give Backs, are both programs related to gift cards, and they are set up such that clubs can receive a rebate when a gift card is purchased through these programs. And we've done sessions on these at some conventions and mid-years already. I've done presentations on Raise Right that we've done on webinars in the past. We can certainly do it more, but I can give you a few war stories, if you will, about Raise Right. I have used that. I've not used givebacks. I like the rebate numbers better out of Raise Right. It's a program where when we're raising money from activities with our members, okay, then what we get as a revenue from that can be used for our club purposes or our administrative purposes. Just like the next item on there, which is when you have a 50-50 at your club meetings. That money can go to your administrative fund because we're raising it from our members. We're not going out to the public and raising the funds. So the Raise Right program is one that Kiwanis International introduced actually during the pandemic. It was something that came out on one of their emails that I happened to notice. And it's actually pretty good in terms of how much one can raise. My club in Charlotte, I'm in two clubs. The club in Charlotte looked at their administrative budget this year and they say, we're about $600 short. You know, we really should have raised dues, but we didn't. So they said, how can we raise money? And I talked to them about Raise Right, and they raised about $600 in about 2 months back in November and December by their members buying gift cards for which those vendors give a percentage back to the company. So for example, and Governor Mary's in a Starbucks right now, and if she had bought, she had a Raise Right account and a gift card, she could have bought $100 gift card for Starbucks. And if she bought it when they were having one of their specials, she should have gotten $7 back, would have gone to the club because they do these specials. Those rebate percentages vary from very small amounts for things like Walmart that gives you 2.5% back, way up to 20% for some places, and sometimes on sales. I was in Applebee's not that long ago. 18% was the rebate. So once you have the program in place and people start to use it, you know, that money can come back into your club. What our Charlotte club did was they just took the money and they put that in the administrative account. What my club in Southport is doing is they're raising it, and we're tracking based because it's all available through the Raise Right app, how much each individual person actually raises as what these rebates are. And we will give them a credit on their next dues invoice for the amount. So if they participate in the program, they get the direct benefit of the rebates to come to the club. If any clubs want more information on Raise Right, I'm happy to talk to you. I'm happy to try to maybe do another webinar or you know, talk to your clubs remotely. Don't have the budget to do a lot of traveling, but we can certainly somehow make that work to give you that new option, a new way that you can raise money. Now, you can also raise money for your service fund with this program, but if you're raising it from your members, there's no reason not to apply that to your administrative fund. I mentioned 50/50s, and some clubs are doing that now, and there's a couple of different ways that they do it. Some of the larger clubs will do a 50/50, and they'll have a drawing, and the winner that day gets half of whatever that pot was on that particular morning. Some other clubs do it as a progressive, if you will. You know, they'll have a deck of cards, and they're saying, okay, if you win the 50/50, if your ticket gets drawn, then you will draw a card from the deck. And the person that, if you pull out the Ace of Hearts, say that's your magic card for your club, then you get whatever's been accumulated in that 50/50. Now, it doesn't usually happen that you get that winner that first week, right? I guess there's a 1 in 52 chance, but I haven't heard of it happening a lot. But sometimes that really starts to add up. You know, when you get halfway through the card deck and the club has collected, you know, $600, $800, $900, now you're talking real money, and people are more apt to maybe even spend a little bit more for some additional tickets. So some of those 50/50, when somebody finally draws that magic card, can be $1,000 or more. So a great way to really kind of build up your administrative fund from sources other than collecting money from our clubs. Happy Dollars, another way to do it. And just if somebody wants to talk a little bit about, you know, something great that's happened in their life, or their family, or they just went on vacation, or they just had a big anniversary, then they'll throw a couple of bucks up to get up in front of the club and tell everybody what's been going on. And that money as well, because it's being raised from our members, can go into our administrative fund. So those are just a few ideas that we had, and I'll open the floor. If anybody has some other thoughts, we'd love to hear them and share them throughout the district.
In my club in Spokane, we went and have fines if somebody wasn't wearing their badge or someone didn't shake someone's
Fines.
hand, and then wore their pins. It cost me a few, quarter at a time, but it added up.
Right, right. I've heard of that. And how about the one where the cell phone rings during the meeting?
Oh, get them every time.
Joe, Lenore Lewis here.
Hi, Lenore.
And I know that we mentioned this at the convention when this subject was discussed. Our club, in addition to doing Happy Dollars, fine period, all the rest of it, we started doing a bourbon tasting. So we host it. Another one of our members brings the bourbon, and we raised close to $2,000 just in one evening. And it's for people who want to participate, it's a really fun thing. It's a great social, and it was very profitable. So we will be doing that again.
Right. I think the idea of having socials that you can make a little bit of money on is generally a good idea as well for our administrative funds. Thanks, Lenore.
Joe,
Anybody else? Yeah.
I understand that the Cape Fear Club is planning a social with members and also to hold a membership drive in conjunction with it to bring out some of those folks who participated in their derby recently. And the idea is to have a white elephant sale with wine and cheese among the club, and those members that participate would then have their dues offset by the money that they spent in the white elephant sale. Sounds like a lot of fun. Can't wait to hear more about it later.
Right. Cool. Well, as y'all have ideas, if you want to share them with us, we're certainly happy to listen and share those across the district. I think these are great ideas that we can do and mitigate some of the costs and maybe not have to pass all of it through on a dollar for dollar basis to our members. The other thing that we wanted to present is that there are certain administrative expenses that our clubs incur that may or may not be currently being funded from our administrative fund and therefore as part of our dues. And one of the bigger ones of those is the liability insurance that we pay to Kiwanis International. And they have told us that those costs can be funded through the service funds of our clubs. So I know we've had some clubs and some treasurers that have been in place for a long time, and they didn't know that. Maybe they preceded when we started talking about that in all of our CLEs, but in any event, that is a possibility that you could take a fairly substantial amount, about $17, if I remember right, that could be per member, that could be funded from your service fund as opposed to from your administrative fund, and therefore have to be part of the dues for your club members. So that is something to consider if your club has not already been doing that. Another one is that starting back in the pandemic, when they had their first service education and service conference out in Salt Lake City, Kiwanis said that the cost for the training that our clubs incur by sending people to our events, that those costs could come from the service funds. So not the cost to go to the House of Delegates and vote and do the business of Kiwanis, but the costs that are associated with going and learning about how to better serve our communities, that was an eligible cost to come from our service funds. So that a component then of our costs for conventions and mid-year conferences could in fact come from our from our service funds. So clubs that have adequate service funds or foundations may be in the position to absorb some costs in these things that they weren't already doing, and therefore not have to put those through in the bill that goes to each of our individual members. And what some of our clubs have also been doing, because as we said, one of the big costs that we're seeing increases in is food costs. They've adjusted the frequency of their meetings. They used to meet every week, but the cost of catering is doubled. So instead of trying to raise their dues to even higher numbers, they've reduced their frequency of meetings to maybe twice a month. And that's not going to work for every club. Clubs that only meet once a month, that's the minimum allowed under our bylaws. But it's just something to keep it out there for clubs that have extraordinarily high dues relative to others. It might be a way to deal with not only the cost of additional catering, but also the increases that district and KI are looking at for this year. Do you have any questions on those? Okay. Well, that really concludes the prepared portion of the evening, but we wanted to give everybody a chance to ask questions or give us other ideas, and I appreciate that some of you have been doing that as we went through, and that's fabulous. But let's just open it up, and Elizabeth is here, District Secretary Leah is here, Governor Mary is with us, so between the four of us, we should be able to answer your questions, we hope. So feel free to ask away.
This is Vicki Ewing with the Hendersonville Club. Our dues without meals is $60 a quarter. How does that compare with other clubs?
Leah, I'm not sure if you have a sense of that. You might be, or Elizabeth.
Yeah, Vicki, I think that's probably most clubs that without a meal are anywhere from $150 to $300 a year. So I think you're probably right in the ballpark.
Okay.
My club is $200. We don't have a meal. And it won't be hard for my club to go to $250 probably, and absorb 10 if both $30 increases pass. But that's probably the norm. I will say that our district dues are some of the lowest in all of Kiwanis International. You don't want to join the Kiwanis Club of Tokyo. Their dues are $2,000 US a year, but they are a very exclusive group. Usually when someone complains about their club dues and you ask them how much they are, and they say $600 a year, and my immediate reply is always, oh, so your meal is included. And actually our district dues portion was very small, and international dues, and remember, it's not just dues, it's liability insurance that covers us as we're doing Kiwanis service, it's directors and officers insurance, and of course the magazine, and a risk management fee. And all those are, liability insurance, D&O insurance, and risk management. Those are all very important for organizations that deal with children. We have to protect our members, and we have to protect our organization as well. And so our actual, for clubs that have a meal, the actual dues portion, the club dues are higher than the Kiwanis and the district dues. I hope that, we've gotten good feedback from all of you, and we're very appreciative of the fact that that you like the level of detail that we've gone into to present to you. But we knew above everything else, we had to be completely transparent and show you our process and why we came to the conclusion that we did. So we very much appreciate everybody who has attended and given us feedback.
I can share that the dues at my Southport Club were also $200, and our board just proposed it to raise it to $250 as well, Elizabeth. So similar.
And my club, meets weekly, and we do have a meal at lunchtime, and our dues are $420 annually.
This is Chris Small in Golden State Kiwanis, Columbia. Came up this morning in our meeting whether, since we're not actually getting a magazine anymore, what is the cost there? Why do we pay a cost for a magazine?
Well, there's still production of that magazine. So we do have a staff at Kiwanis International that is their job. And so there's still production of a magazine that's digital instead of paper. You still have to produce it. What they're saving is that paper cost. And we're trying to be environmentally sensitive as well, because the fact of the matter is we do have this thing called a magazine fund at Kiwanis International that we really can't do anything with. But we still have to have staff that prepares it, lays it out, and prepares it to go out. So there's still a cost. Believe you, I mean, the magazine cost is only $8, and that did not cover the magazines that have been sent over the years. It did not cover basically the expense of that magazine. So it actually probably does cover the expense of producing the digital content now.
Okay.
That's a very good question.
Yeah, thank you for answering, and I'll pass it along.
Along those lines, this is Vicky Ewing. I don't get the magazine, the digital copy of the magazine. Do I have to go on to KI and sign up for that? How do I? I used to get the paper copy, but it doesn't come to my email anymore.
They still do a paper copy a couple of times a year. I think I need to look into that to give you a really good answer. And it may be that your address is incorrect in the Kiwanis portal and it's not getting to you. Well,
Vicky, I'll say that one hasn't come out recently. It's been a few months.
Okay.
So, but they do send it to everyone they have an email on file to, sort of like CD News. There's a link that takes you to it, but it hasn't come out recently. So you haven't, when it comes out, I'll make sure to put in CD News that it's out. So
Okay.
hopefully we'll catch a few that
it's not a month.
Can see if it's happening. It's not a monthly subscription.
It's not monthly. It's either 6 or, and I know they have reduced the number. It used to be 8. It might be 6 now. So because there is a lot of information that is online. So
I just found the Kiwanis magazine at kiwanismagazine.org.
Okay, I'll check that out.
And Mary, does it have a month on it?
No, and I can't. Now I'm looking at it on my telephone, and I don't really see a date that these articles were published either. But it does have a tab for past issues, which I think is nice.
I use that a lot. I use the archives a lot.
I look
Sorry, I
forward
muted
to meeting
myself.
some of you folks at the KI convention here in a couple of weeks.
That's right, Art. I saw you registered. That's great. Look forward to it. We're going to have a session ahead of time for our district folks. Leah, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure. So if you are registered for the International Convention, you have received one email very similar to CD News, talking about getting a shirt and the different idea of getting small groups together for dinner. And in there, we also talked about having this free social icon event on June 14th at 7 p.m. And we will be sending you a reminder of that next week, right before the event. And then probably one the same day. So it'll have the link for you to click and join a webinar just like this. But you don't have to register for it because you're already registered for the International Convention.
Yeah, we're trying to be a little bit more careful. We had some people last year, Art, that came to International from the district, and none of us kind of figured out that we hooked up with them. So we want to make sure that we know where to find each other and get together.
It'll be
Great.
fun.
Good.
And Art, it'll be a great way to meet some Kiwanians before you get there. So, and welcome to the Carolinas, by the way. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
Any other input from the group on the dues adjustment or the ideas for other ways to fund our administrative costs at the club levels? Okay.
Joe,
Well,
I want to thank you and Elizabeth. You've invested a huge amount of time to ensuring that the decision around how much to ask for the dues adjustment was accurate. It's what's needed. You've worked really hard to pull together projections to better understand where we will be in 5 years with or without the adjustment. So thank you so much for all that you've done to provide an informative and honest webinar tonight, and all that you've done throughout this process to ensure that Carolinas Kiwanians understand why this is a necessary ask. And I also want to say to all of you who are on tonight that we really appreciate that you've spent some time with us this evening to have your questions answered, to better understand. And we hope that you will help to answer questions within your club to ensure that every Kiwanian better understands why this is necessary. You've heard a lot tonight about ways to offset the expense of a dues adjustment within your club and how to build up your administrative fund so that this isn't a painful increase. And I also want to emphasize that the fact that we have lost members is a part of the reason why we're where we are today. And I can tell you over the years that I've been involved with the Carolinas District Board, which has been 6 or 7 years now on one level or another, is I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that the district has been fiscally responsible. The fact that we have a reserve is indicative of that. The fact that we've not taken that reserve until recent years is also indicative of the fact that the district has been very responsible with the budget. But I think the thing that we need to note is that one of the reasons that we're where we are today is the fact that our membership has decreased. And I believe there are two ways we can combat that. And that is to grow our existing clubs, and the other is to build new clubs. Make the ask and invite someone to this organization that is really working to make a difference in the lives of children, especially coming out of the pandemic when we know that children need us now more than ever. So yeah, we want members. It'll help offset the dues adjustment, but that's not the reason for Kiwanis. The reason for Kiwanis is Kiwanis service. So please ask someone to be a part of this organization so that we can continue to make the impact that Kiwanis is known for. Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Mary. Leah, any closing words?
No, I agree with Mary, and I appreciate all the input and suggestions this evening. And if you guys come up with any other ideas, please send them our way. I will put my email in the chat. And as you know, you can always reply to CD News as well. I've mentioned that several times. It comes out on Wednesdays. If you are not receiving CD News, feel free to give me an email and I can see what's going on. But thank you again, everyone, and hope to see you soon on the next webinar. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.